Hey friends, Pastor Paul here. I want to give you a recap of what we looked at this past week in Bible study in Genesis 20 and 21. These two chapters provide us with a sandwich starting and concluding with encounters with Abimelech and having at its center the story of Abraham's two sons. So let's look first at the pieces of bread. Abraham's dealing with the Philistine king Abimelech. You're going to feel echoes in reading chapter 20 because it seems like the exact same thing that happened in chapter 12 when Abraham and Sarah go to Egypt and they lie about being siblings rather than married. And this time Abimelech, the king, takes Sarah into his household to be his wife. And this time, God intervenes and stops any punishment. And Abimelech hears God warning him in a dream not to do this. So this trouble is caused by Abraham and Sarah's deception. And it's something that seems habitual. If you look at verse 13, it seemed like they were in the habit of doing this, of saying that they are not brother and sister, but saying that they are not spouse, but brother and sister. Eventually, the truth is revealed in a dream from God to Abimelech, and it's also revealed by God that Abraham is to serve in a special role as prophet. Now, Abimelech is called to go to Abraham and ask Abraham as a prophet to intercede on his behalf to spare him any punishment. But the story ends up leaving you scratching your head because you ask, who is the one who seems to fear God and do right? And the obvious answer is not Abraham. And yet God still has chosen to work through Abraham, even though he's an imperfect vessel. And he uses him with the purpose to bless the world. Now, the second dealing with Abimelech is very different. After living in the land of Abimelech, Abraham runs into a dispute over the ownership of a well. In a revealing moment, Abimelech asks Abraham to swear before God that he will not deal falsely with him. He knows about Abraham's deceitful nature. Clearly, he had learned that Abraham may not be trustworthy, and he's not afraid to let Abraham know it. But Abraham is not offended or deterred in this moment. He brings livestock to seal the treaty and offers 7 lambs as a sign of his truthfulness. Remember, I said before how they do these things with flourish back then. So these 7 lambs that he brings are a sign that he is telling the truth. And this is also a sign to us that the character of Abraham seems to be developing. Furthermore, he's recognized for having God with him. That's how Abimelech recognizes him. And he affirms his connection with God at the end of the chapter as he plants the tamarisk tree and calls on the name of the Lord. Now, in between these two accounts are the stories of Abraham's two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. So first, we're told the birth of Isaac. And he arrives as the child of promise, but he is not given much fanfare in the biblical text. Simply, these are the promises that God made, and it happened as God said it would. And Abraham and Sarah respond faithfully to what God has done. They name him Isaac, which is what God told them to do. They have him circumcised on the 8th day, which is also part of the commands that God has given. And Sarah is also given a moment of reflection where she speaks, and she recognizes that God has given her the joy of laughter in her son. Who would have thought that this would happen to Sarah, that she would be nursing a child? Well, God thought that, and God made it happen. But now tension quickly emerges as Ishmael, Abraham's son to Hagar, makes his mocking presence known. Sarah, who undoubtedly realize that you can't have 2 firstborn sons, seeks to dismiss Hagar's son and protect her own. Only one can have the inheritance. After God's reassurance, Abraham sends Hagar and Ishmael away, and they travel into the desert, and they run out of water and are about to die. But God hears the boy crying and intervenes and allows Hagar to see a source of water. God also gives the same reassurance to Hagar that he did to Abraham, and that is that a nation will come from her child, that a nation will come from Ishmael. The story concludes saying that God is with Ishmael as he grew up, and And also, it's a reminder that the promised line will continue through Isaac, the son of Abraham and Sarah. And that's pretty much the conclusion of the story of Ishmael and his mother Hagar and their line, though there is a little cameo later on. But the next thing that we'll continue with will be the story of the binding of Isaac. And I hope that you join in Tuesday at 7 o'clock on Zoom as we continue our study through the life of Abraham.